Hello, and welcome to episode 10 in this series recounting our recent Iberian circumnavigation. We stayed in Andorra for a couple of nights, and if you watch episode 8, you can hear more about our experiences there. It was good. Waiting an extra day in Andorra for poor weather to clear turned out to be a smart move. After I made sure I could film from my new hat, we set out on a beautiful, sharp and sunny morning and rode up from the city to Port de Cabos on a mountain pass that is tarmac on the Andorran side, which is an ascent, but then turns to dirt on the Spanish side, which is a descent. On the way up, we came across Storm in a Teacup, and large-scale sculpture constructed of iron pipe by artist Dennis Oppenheim. This was produced as part of commemorations associated with the 25th anniversary of the creation of the Andorran social security system. The sculpture plays with the idea that a big problem in a small space becomes a small problem when set in a much bigger space. At the top of the pass, where the tarmac turns to dirt, is a very unusual border crossing. Spain is in the Schengen area, whereas Andorra is not, so there would normally be a border control post and a customs checkpoint here, but instead there is just a small herd of cows which, whilst they do wear bells, are otherwise unarmed, do not have peak caps, and seem unconcerned as to where, for example, I might have purchased my helmet. Perhaps for this reason, this notorious route is known as the Smuggler's Trail or Tobacco Road, officially the Col de Botella. At an altitude of 2,300 metres or 7,545 feet, the trail offers stunning scenery throughout the long descent through the mountains. As a technical test for the off-road motorcyclist, the Smuggler's Road provides nothing of note, although a decent rain shower certainly might explain its reputation as a bit of a challenge, since the hard-packed clay-like surface is gripless and slimy wherever there's any moisture. My 50/50 road/dirt tyres, almost brand new at the start of this adventure, were now, several thousand kilometres in, well worn, the front flatly refusing to bite into the smuggler's surface, instead preferring to perform a Bambi on ice impression as I slithered ever downwards in an increasingly nervous style. This meant that Nozzer would have to overtake me at regular intervals just in order for him to maintain enough speed to stay aboard his mighty 1190 and keep it cool enough to prevent it misbehaving, since its ongoing power delivery problems, as mentioned in the last episode, seemed, in part, to be exacerbated by higher engine temperatures as well as the thinner air at these altitudes. One of our stops was for a quick look at the village of Tor, which by appearance at least remains charmingly frozen in a time long since past, and no doubt had seen more than its fair share of tobacco and God knows what else smugglers back in the day. Now it seems a fairy tale hideaway buried in this beautiful landscape, but I'd be willing to bet it can be a bit on the bleak side come winter. From there we returned to tarmac at the village of Allins to begin a lengthy, fast and flowing tarmac section until climbing once more to yet another high, long and beautiful Pyrenean dirt trail. Such a huge contrast to the riding on the Portuguese leg of our journey a fortnight previously. Neither better nor worse, mind you, and in fact a treat to have been able to experience such variety on a single trip. After powering up this long dirt road, we emerged higher than ever to edge along spectacular steep slopes under fabulous blue skies. This really was among the very best any adventure rider could hope for, seemingly many miles from civilization, enjoying great weather with a like-minded riding companion for company. Another fantastic day's riding and definitely one of the best on our whole trip.
What a line, eh? Brilliant. For some reason, whistling when you switch it off. The ignition is off, it carries on making that noise. It's very odd. Listen, can you hear it? I'm happy if that's all it is. It's been singing away for like quite a while. Yeah. Yeah. I can't hear it now.
Pressure build up.
Well, if that's all it is. I wonder if that's to do with altitude, because we're 6,839 feet here and we're still climbing. Oh yeah, see him. You think that's a boppy? Yeah, absolutely. What did you do? Oh, what are we doing? This way.
our day at a roadside hotel and restaurant. One highlight for me were the owner's beautiful family of goats, and he clearly shared my passion for these characterful beasts. The requirement for the 4-inch thick hardwood timbers of the magnificent Billy Goat's pen door was ably demonstrated by way of a mighty headbutt to the woodwork. Come the morning we elected not to risk any more of this fine establishment's cuisine. We hit the road in uncharacteristically efficient fashion to head once more for the high places and more Pyrenean loveliness. Be you rambler, cyclist, or aboard some motorised contraption, you really should add the Pyrenees to your bucket list. They're just stunning. On this morning, we weren't too far into being stunned before we met up with Paul, a southern English rider conducting his CRF 300L Honda. A brief chat soon established that I recognised this fellow from his YouTube channel.
I think I've seen your YouTube channel.
Riding with Mr. P, on which he gives great no-nonsense accounts of his various motorcycling escapades, and in doing so offers considerably more professional content than I can muster. Paul was at a rather low point when we met, as can happen to all of us from time to time when out on the trails with only our own baggage in tow, so we offered our company as a distraction for a while should he wish. We too are, after all, nothing if not a distraction. Paul warned us that he liked to crack on a bit on the trails and had already had a less than wonderful experience having hooked up with a painfully slow rider a few days before, rendering him about ready to throw the towel in on his trip. Paul's temporary and understandable need for speed would present no problem to Noz, who I'm sure won't mind me saying loves a challenge and, in my experience, is perfectly capable of riding considerably faster than anyone else around without compromising anybody's safety. On the other hand, as I warned Paul, my own off-road capability ensures that in many circumstances on the dirt I am being overtaken by slow worms, slow lorises, three-toed sloths, pensioners on mobility scooters, hedgehogs, tortoises, drying paint and growing grass. As a naturally kindly fellow, Paul made the forgiving assumption that this lack of Billy Bolt-like progress was due to my being a relative newcomer to the off-road game. True, there had been over a half-century's gap between my youthful stealth entry under a parent-avoiding pseudonym into an under-16 trials championship, during which I conducted a D1 Series 3-speed BSA Bantam onto which I had grafted a BSA C15's front forks and wheel, rendering the machine similar in weight to a Sherman tank, and my modern-day return to green laning around 8 years ago, coinciding with that time of life when, for many, like it or not, the infuriating habit of creeping risk aversion begins to take hold, grabbing a rider by the balls and mercilessly squeezing until he rolls off the throttle, thereby faltering in that all-important blind commitment that, ironically, actually makes for safer progress on tricky terrain. Nevertheless, Paul did agree to ride with us and soon realised that Noz is some kind of special on the rough stuff, and I'm at least no slouch when there's some tarmac or a loose surface I can trust to be attacked. So riding with Messrs N and N wasn't too much of a hardship for Mr. P after all. Thus we ploughed on together, generally in an upwards direction as the ACT routes, whilst deliberately unchallenging to ensure suitability for larger adventure bikes, tend to keep to the highest and thus most visually spectacular trails. And what an enjoyable day's riding ensued. Paul demonstrated his drone at one photo stop. We found some terrific views up in these mountains, and once again the weather was pretty much perfect. I always like these chance meetings with other riders. As you're riding there's zero chat, so you build up a picture of your new companion sporadically during brief stops, bit by bit like a jigsaw, and of course you recognise the pieces that are familiar and fit in with your own experiences as you go along. At another stop, this time for lunch, we met up with a group of riders from Ireland. Like us, doing the ACT Pyrenees east to west, but unlike us, complete with support van. These fellows were certainly experiencing an eventful trip, having left one of their number hospitalised and now carrying another less injured lad from their group in their van, along with a couple of very much less than roadworthy bikes. Nozzer and I would meet this group again a few days later. After what seemed like a reasonable amount of distance had been covered, I spotted a decent-looking campsite in the hills above the town of Broto. This site was complete with shady pitches, showers, a restaurant and a bar, so we booked ourselves some spaces and pitched up for the night. The showers boasted porcelain sinks that incorporated washboards. I'd never seen these before and took full advantage as my base layers were really starting to develop the ability to self-propel, and I was afraid they might wander off on their own just to escape my reeking pits, thereby causing me to lose them. Later I joined Noz and Paul, who had embarked on a beer-fuelled burgeoning bromance as they discovered they had been forging remarkably similar paths during their lives. Not least among the small world coincidences was the fact that both had enjoyed periods of rally driving behind the wheels of rear-wheel drive Ford Escorts during the halcyon pre-Group B era of rallying, when particular skills were required and a great deal of never-to-be-repeated fun was had by all at club level. A few minor hints also allowed me to perceive that there was a connection with Mr. P for me too, as sneak mentions of certain cultural icons that graced the salad days of the late 60s and early 70s, let's say my own halcyon era, were also familiar to our new friend. To my considerable surprise, and despite the previous evening's excessive Stein abuse, not only did I manage to be ready in the morning, but by the time Noz and Paul emerged, I was already 2 coffees in, had camping gear packed and bike warm and ready to hightail it out of there, and I'd plotted a cycle race avoidance route. Unfortunately, this latter effort only succeeded in taking us some miles to the beginning of the same event a couple of towns away, and yet another closed road. At this point, Paul showed his traveller's experience, taking command and, after circumnavigation attempt number 1 led us into somebody's garden, found us a canny wee route on a dirt track that cleverly avoided the obstacle and set us back on our way. The most spectacular part of the Pyrenees was now behind us, and although we found one of the best in purely technical terms trails on the entire route, a rocky, rutted and at times quite steep ascent peppered with a lot of sharp-looking rocks and topped off with some deep ruts, mud and puddles, the general trend was less mountainous, less dirt-oriented and more tarmac. Thus did Paul decide to leave us around midday, head off north into France and begin his long trail back to Blighty. Riding with Mr. P was a true pleasure. We both felt we'd met a kindred spirit, and he proved to be a truly kind riding companion, keeping an eye on this wobbly old codger, which in turn allowed Noz at last to stretch his internal combustion legs. As to Mr. P's own riding ability, he most clearly demonstrates that in motorcycling it's the rider, not the machine, that counts. I've owned one of those Hondas like Paul's, so I know well that charming machine's not in considerable limitations. Yet Mr. P conducted his little Honda in a way that would make any onlooker think it was he who was on a KTM 790 and I who was aboard the Honda. I have no doubt that he would also embarrass most 1190 or 1290 riders. Most, yes, but we're talking Noz here, and as I've pointed out before in these videos, Noz simply ain't most riders. Well met, Mr. P. I certainly hope our paths will cross again someday. Right, I'm off for now, but do join us again for episode 11, which will probably mark the end of the series, unless it doesn't. Thank you for watching as always, and stay safe unless you've had enough of this mortal coil. Either way, bye for now.